All right, so today we're talking about sampling. We're kind of getting into the beginning of sampling. And the first thing I just want to talk about real quick is what does sampling actually mean? What does that word mean? And hey Barb, what's up? And what is a sampler? So a sampler is any device that allows you to record audio, then assign that audio to keys or pads for musical playback. So technically, Ableton Live is not a sampler. Technically, Pro Tools is not a sampler. Logic is not a sampler. These are not samplers. These are DAWs, digital audio workstations. Now, with Ableton Live, it kind of blurs the line between a sampling, like a sampler, like a device that you can record audio and assign it to keys or pads for musical playback, and a DAW, in that in the session view, you can actually use that for assigning samples to those various clip slots, and then you can trigger them with keys on your keyboard. So you could actually call, and here's how I look at Ableton Live, as a kind of sampling instrument DAW. And which is why I actually like to use it, because I do a lot of sampling with my music production. I like using samples that I've recorded. I like using samples that I've made, and I like taking sounds and twisting them and doing things to them. And so using Ableton Live allows me to do that very, very quickly. Whereas using Pro Tools, you can do that, but you can't do it as quickly as you can in Ableton Live. And same thing with Logic. Logic, you can do it, but it doesn't work quite as seamlessly as in Ableton Live. And I'm going to show you a few things today which are pretty cool. So today what we're going to do is we are going to use Ableton Live, and we're also going to use Kontakt from Native Instruments. And the reason why I'm using Kontakt a little bit today is because it allows me to quickly show you various things that Ableton does allow me to show you, but you kind of have to have the sampler instrument for it to work. And I'm going to show you in both things. Over the course of this week, or over the course of these lessons, I'm going to show you how to do sampling in Ableton Live. I'm going to show you how to do it in Kontakt. I'm going to show you how to do it in Logic. I'm going to show you how to do it with Pro Tools. I'm going to show you how to do it with an MPC. So all those things we're going to learn how to do it. The only thing I don't have is I don't have the Electone sampling instrument. I forget what they call that. I don't have that one, but I have all the other ones, and so I can show you how to do everything with those. So you get a few different looks at the world of sampling. Now, one other thing is that there are some vocabulary that is across the whole spectrum of any sampler that you use. It's going to have certain vocabulary words associated with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up in Ableton Live. I'm going to open up a Kontakt instrument. So let's go ahead and grab Kontakt, and down here, audio units. So here's my Kontakt. I'm going to use Kontakt 6. It looks the same as Kontakt 5, but it is Kontakt 6. And we are going to open this up, and I'm going to use this as a kind of starting point. I don't have any of my libraries loaded up right now, so I'm just going to click on, let's actually get rid of that whole screen over there on the side. Oh, hold on a second. Let me throw some samples in here. And let's navigate down here to, what do I even have here for samples? Let's see. Splice sound. In here I got some samples. Samples. There we go. Some samples in here. I have a little bit. Let's see here. New York streets.
So you remember the Transformers, right?
Let's see here. What else we got? Slate samples. I don't have anything in there. Cartagena. Oh, here we go. Here's some samples of horses walking around. So we'll use these to kind of go with. Well, that's a good place to start. So I'm just going to take that and drag it in here. Come on. Can I drag it straight in? No, I can't drag it straight in. Hold on. I'll drag it in over here. The reason I can't drag it straight into Kontakt is it's because it's an M4A file. And from here, can I drag it in here? I can't even drag it in from there. Hold on a second. Let's see what we got here. M4A. Okay, Ableton Live didn't convert it. That's interesting. Hold on, let's see what else we got here. Okay, here we go. Some MPC sample stuff. Okay, cool. We'll use this. Going here. Here's some beats. Bass. Stop playing. MPC programs, Renegade Masters Live. Let's see what we got in here. I got you, Lorenzo. Yeah, you're good. You're good. Let's see here, because I have everything on my external hard drive. So let's see. Maybe in here. Hold on, just give me 1 second. Sorry about this. I forgot to look for this stuff. Samples, because all those hip hop samples and stuff are on. Well, here, let's just grab those. I'll go in here to Canvas and grab those samples from here on Canvas. And those samples are going to end up either in a couple places, in the Ableton Live place here, the hip hop samples, or I think also down here in samples. Are they in here as well? No. Okay, so these hip hop samples here, grab these, download these, and I'll throw them into my computer just when those download. Just give those a second to download. Wow, seems really, oh, it's probably because it comes from SAE. Seems really like long to download these samples. But in the meantime, let's just go ahead and open up a brand new thing here. And in here, let's take a look at some of this. So in here is the mapping editor. And the mapping editor shows us a couple things. One, we've got a keyboard across the bottom here, and then it goes up and down like this. And the keyboard across the bottom represents a MIDI keyboard. So the low keys are on the left, the high keys on the right. And as we go up, it represents velocities. So the velocities are going up like that. Let's go ahead and take a look in Ableton Live here at the sampler instrument that comes with Ableton Live Suite. Throw that in here. And in here, we've got a knob, a thing here called zones. And the zones here has key zones and it's got velocity zones. And they're both over here on the right-hand side. The key zones and the velocity zones. Now, if we go look at our preview here, a couple things of vocabulary. Right here, we've got the sample start, the sample end. This is pretty self-explanatory. The sample start is where the audio recording starts. The sample end is where the audio recording ends. The root note is the note on the keyboard that plays the original sample pitch. And if you go up, it's going to play faster and higher. If you go down, it's going to play slower and lower. And I'm going to demonstrate that for you here in a little bit. Then we've got our key zones. The key zones assign the sample to specific keys on the keyboard. And you've got a low key and a high key. The low key is the start of the key zone, and the high key is the end of the key zone. And again, I'm going to demonstrate all this stuff in just a second here. I'm just going to go through them real quick. Then you've got velocity zones, assigns the sample to specific velocities. Remember, velocity is how hard or soft you play the key on the keyboard. So velocity zone, you've got a low zone, you got a low velocity, and you've got a high velocity. Again, the low velocity is how soft it is, and the high velocity is how hard it's pressed. Then you've got multi-sampling. And multi-sampling is a technique that enables multiple samples to be used within one instrument. This is great for acoustic instruments to make them sound more natural. It's also great for like drum kits, to put together drum kits where you've got a kick and a snare and a hi-hat and all that stuff going on. Then you've got groups, which allows you to adjust parameters of multiple samples all at the same time. So let's say you have like a drum kit and it's got 5 samples in it. You could assign those to a group and you could adjust all those samples at the same time. So that's what grouping does. And all the different samplers out there in the world allow you to group samples together. They do them in slightly different ways, but they all allow you to do it. Then you've got tuning, which adjusts the pitch or speed of the sample in semitones. You've got a loop, which lets you play the entire sample or a portion of it repeatedly. It just kind of repeats that part and it loops it. Then you've got, for looping, you've got the loop start, which is the start point of the loop, and the end, which is the end point of the loop. So here's some graphics here that I drew that just demonstrates those things. So you've got key zones here. This key zone, this sample would be assigned to 1 key, whereas this sample here would be assigned to 5 keys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're both key zones. This one is on key C3. And this one here would be E3 to G sharp 3. Now, the way we do the keys on your keyboard, and you can see that in Ableton Live, you can see it in Logic, you can see it everywhere, is over here. See this if I zoom in on this? If I zoom in on this, it shows you different note numbers here. So we can see all these different note numbers, and they all have they have like the letter and they have the number. So if I mouse over it, you can see it's saying G2, G sharp 2, right? Over here is G3. These are different octaves. So it shows the note letter, which is the letter name, and then it has a number next to it. And that number next to it represents an octave. So C1 is right here, C0, C minus 1, C minus 2, and then it goes up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up 7, 8 over here like that. They both show them like that. Down here, you got the same thing. Let's look in Kontakt. And you can see here, it's got C0, minus 1, minus 2, C1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Same numbers, everything like that. So that shows you your note, what we call the note number, right? So that your assigned key, this one's just on one key, so it'll have the same key for the beginning and the end. The low, the one on the left represents your low key, and the one on the right represents your high key. So the low key is where the sample starts, and the high key is where that sample ends on the keyboard right here. And if it has the same note number for both keys, then it's just going to be one key right there. So if it's the same C3 C3, it's just going to be one key right there. Now the root note shows us where the sample, where it's going to play the original pitch of the sample. The root note in this case is inside the key zone, but the root note does not have to be inside of the key zone. You can take the root note and put it outside of the key zone. That's right here. The root note does not have to be inside the key zone. I'm going to show you a couple of those here in just a second. So now that I've got my hip hop samples downloaded, let's go ahead and drag them into my, let's go ahead and grab sound, and let's grab samples. There we go. And I'm going to grab my downloads here. Where is it? Right here. There we go. Boop. Okay. So hip hop samples. I'm going to open up this, and this is something you probably have done at home. Like I said, it's on my external hard drive. It's just, I don't have my external hard drive right here. What is up, Vega? How you doing? Boom. All right, so here's the folder. Let me go ahead and delete this one. And these here all need to be opened up as well. So I'm just going to open those up. All right. Gonna delete these out of here. Get them off my hard drive. There we go. All right, so we got these here. So what I can do is I can do this inside of Ableton Live. I can do it in Kontakt as well. I'm just going to do it in Ableton Live because that's a bit easier. Over here in the places, I'm just going to navigate to that hip hop samples folder in sound, and here in samples. There we go, and we're going to go in here to hip hop samples, and I'm just going to open up that folder right there. Put that in. And now inside of this folder, it's going to show me all my different drum loops and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and take a look at these loops. And I've got some, here's some drum loops. Let's grab, okay, let's grab that one. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take that, and I'm going to go through a little bit more detail on a different day about how to use Kontakt, but for right now, I'm just going to drag this sample into Kontakt and drop it right there, boom. Because it's not an M4A sample, it's not an M4A thing, it's going to actually work here. Okay, I see what's going on here. I just want to get rid of that browser on the side. Okay. So because it's not an M4A file, it's a WAV file, it'll actually let me drag it into Kontakt. Kontakt does not allow you to work with M4A files. It used to be that Ableton Live would convert those files, but it looks like it's not converting the file anymore. It's using it natively, which is interesting. I'm going to have to do a little bit more research on that to see what the deal is with that. But in here, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and change this to sampler mode real quick. We'll explain all that a different day. But in here's my mapping editor. So right now you can see now there's like a yellow block here. This yellow block represents where my sample is on the keyboard. I'm going to go ahead and throw this into Ableton Sampler as well down here. Boom, there's my sampler. And you can see same thing on here. It's got my low key and my high key over here on the right, and you can see there's like a line, and if I drag this, I can limit where the sample is actually on my keyboard. So this is the key zone right here. So you can see it's only going on 1 octave right there. What's up, Marvin? How you doing? Okay, so we got that there, and same thing in Kontakt. If I go here to Kontakt, if I go over here on the left-hand side, this yellow block, I can just grab it and drag it over here like this, and drag this side over here like this. There we go. So now you can see this sampler over here, I've got it set for 2 octaves, C2 to C4, or B3 rather. And over here, I've got it set for just 1 note. Okay, so this is what it looks like when it's 1 note, and this is what it looks like when it's like basically a full octave right there. So we got that going on. Now, if I hit keys on my keyboard, here's my oops. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so Kontakt right here. If I hit keys on my keyboard, okay, let me just hit some keys here. Let me show you what this looks like. If we zoom in on this, check this out. If I play a key down here, you can see the little red dots are lighting up on my screen, but nothing's happening. That's because the sample is not assigned to these keys. It's outside of the key zone. But if I go over here, now you can see it's playing all those different notes. Let me just move my cursor there. If I play this one, it plays it like that. If I play this one up here, oh, what's up? From New York. Hey, you're my neighbor. We're right in New York. I'm in New York as well. So here, we got this one here. Right? So this is what sampling, this is what these samples look like. And you can see those little dots, those little red lines there. If I play the key softer, it's going to be a lower dot. If I play it harder, it's a higher dot. So those dots are representing they are representing the velocity level, how hard I'm hitting the key. And where they play left and right is representing actually which key I'm on. So if I want this sample to be across all the keys on my keyboard, I just drag it over. I drag the key zone over like that. And so now it's playing it low and slow like this. I can play it in the middle, and I can play it up high. Now, you can hear a couple things. One is that it's playing it higher, but it's also, number 2, playing it faster. So when you're dealing with samples, when you play higher, it's going to speed up the pitch, but it's also going to speed up the tempo. Or it's going to raise the pitch, sorry, and speed up the tempo. This is just natural physics at work. This is not a special effect. I know it sounds like a special effect. It seems like it's doing something weird and crazy, but it's not. It's actually just doing it very natural. And this is just how all samplers have worked traditionally. Up until about 2004 or maybe 2, like you couldn't really do anything but that. If you played it higher, it was going to play it faster, and if you played it lower, it was going to play it slower. It was around 2002 or 2003 that Yamaha, I think it was Yamaha, maybe it was Roland, released a sampler that actually allowed you to kind of disconnect the pitch from the time, but Ableton Live allowed you to do that as well. But the difference was that Ableton Live didn't actually allow you to play samples inside of it because it didn't have MIDI effects that you could put inside of it. So it wasn't quite the same thing. But there was a hardware sampler that was released early 2000s or late 90s, and I forget who it was, Yamaha or Roland, but it allowed you to kind of disconnect the pitch from the time a little bit and speed things up and slow them down without adjusting the pitch, which was really crazy. Now, it sounded like garbage. It sounded really, really bad, but it was the cutting edge of technology. Yeah, the Roland Very phrase, stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, this thing was like, it was pretty cool, but it didn't sound great back then. Ableton Live didn't sound great back then. If you went too far from your original tempo, it was going to start to sound really choppy, especially if you were going slow. So samplers have come a long way since then, but we're not going to get into that yet. I just want to really my point of explaining this is that this function of playing faster when you play higher on the keyboard is not a special effect. That's just how things work. And if you play down here, it plays it slower. It's also just how things work. Now, one thing to keep in mind with this is that if I play, here's my original pitch. Now, how do I know this is my original pitch? Well, because on here, it has a little yellow note. This is, again, it's Kontakt, and this is how Kontakt shows this. It shows my root note is C3. We can also see it right here. It says the root note is C3. Remember, root is the original playback of the audio. That's where you're going to hear the audio. It's original playback. So here it is right there. Boom. Now, this is this tempo. It's 85. I know that because it's in the name of the sample here. So 85. Now, if I play it up an octave, that is going to be twice as fast. So if you ever wanted to have, if you have a drum loop and you want to just play it twice as fast and you want it to pitch up, then you can just play it up an octave on your keyboard. So if I play them both at the same time, right, you can hear. Same thing if I go down an octave, right, it's playing it at half the time, half speed. The reason why that is because if you go back to Mod 1 and you remember what you learned in Mod 1, when we talk about octaves in the frequencies, an octave is double the frequency or half the frequency. What does frequency mean? Frequency is just how often something happens, and that's basically the same as tempo. So tempo, if you play up an octave, it's going to play double the tempo. If you play down an octave, it's going to halve the tempo. Again, not special effects. This is just how samplers work. Now, that can be really cool or it can be really frustrating if you want to play a sample and you want it to play different pitches without actually changing the speed. Well, then you have to do some, you have to click a button in here. It's not hard to do, but you do have to click a button. But I'm not going to go there yet because we need to take this one step at a time. So this is my key zones here. I can play across the keys. I can assign it to just one note like that. So now it's assigned to just one note, and I play that note. There it is right there. I play any other notes, and we are not going to hear that sample being triggered because it's not triggering the sample. Now in Logic, in Kontakt, it shows us the key zone right here. So this is what I was talking about. You can grab this and drag it up, and it will change that right there. So now I can have this so it's assigned from G2 to G3. That's one octave. It is right here in the middle from G2, right here. If I play down here, we're not going to hear it. To up here, G3, right there. And if I play up here, we're also not going to hear it. What is up, Sam? How you doing? So in this case, there we go. In this case here, we've got this set up. Now, let's go ahead and talk about looping. So we just mentioned about looping here. I'm going to go into my wave editor, and in here in the wave editor, let me close my mapping editor. In here, we can see this mapping editor is really easy to use. And a lot of the software samplers and even the hardware samplers these days, like I have a MPC Live, that's got a screen on it that's basically a touchpad, like an iPad with, it's basically the MPC Live is an iPad with hardware. It's dedicated, so it works better than an iPad does for sampling and stuff like that, because you've got hardware, you've got knobs and stuff built right into it. But it's very computer-like. So on all these different machines nowadays, you've got your start point here where I can move this. When I move it, that's going to start my sample. Hold on, let me just go down here and adjust this release. There we go. That's driving me nuts. So in here, there we go. If I want to just grab the snare drum, so if I just wanted to sample that snare drum, I can set my start point and my end point so it's just on this snare drum right here. And now I've grabbed that snare drum. If I just want to grab this kick drum here, I can do the same thing. Move that over, there we go. Right, and I can use this to build up a drum kit. And this is what people do still. There's a hi-hat right there. They still do it like this. But this is like, if we go back to the early days of hip-hop, this is exactly how people always did it. They would sample from records. You'd have a record, like a James Brown record or something like that, and you'd grab a kick drum, a snare drum, and a hi-hat, and you'd make your own beats. And I'm going to show you how to do that here in a second. But just starting off right here, that's our sample end is the E, which makes sense, and the S, which stands for start. also makes sense. That's our sample start and end points right there. So we've got that. Now let's set up a loop on this. Now what the loop does is it allows me to just play one note, and it's going to loop that sample. So I can just keep this held down, and it's just going to keep playing this loop indefinitely until I let go. Right? So if I play it, I don't have to re-trigger it. I don't have to play it again. I can just hold it down, and it will go ahead and play it for me until I let go. It'll just play it forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, ever. Okay? So that's what the loop does. And if I wanted to change the loop points, well, we can see in here, if I go and grab it, this yellow box is my loop. So I can go over here and I can grab that. Boom. And let's do this. Let's loop that part right there. So what this is going to do is it's going to start here and play and then loop this section right here. So I'm going to go ahead and hold that down and show you this. Okay. Now you can hear the loop is a little bit wonky there. It's not exact, and so what we'll do is we'll go over here, we'll zoom in, and we'll move this over just a little bit like that, and we'll go back to the beginning here. Boom, and move this over a little bit. And so there we go. So now we got that there. I'm going to zoom back out again. Okay. And let's play that. Much better, right? Cool. Okay, so you could do that. You can set up in Kontakt. You can actually set up multiple loop points, which is great for sound design and setting up instruments and things like that. But for a drum loop like this, it's way overkill. So if I'm just doing basic loops, basic sampling, stuff like that, then I don't usually use any of those other 8 things. Those loop points. That's what all these mean here. This is more advanced stuff. So that's that there. We got the start loop start and the loop end. Now you can see here it has numbers right here. Well, these are actually numbers according to sample points in the sampler in the audio. And this is how, when I first started sampling, my very first sampler was an Akai SO1, which was just entry level. It was like I don't know, probably $600 or $800 or something like that. It was a very entry level sampler. It could only use like a couple samples at a time, and you could just throw them in there and kind of do basic things with them. It was really just to get you into the world of sampling. And then I got an S2800, which cost a few $1,000s. And I mean, and so when you hear me say things like this, it's kind of funny because you're like, wait, what? Did you say a few $1,000s? And yeah, I said a few $1,000s. It was like 1,200 or 2,000 or something like that. I forget what it was. And this is back in like 1992 or 3 or something like that. When I got the S2800, I was like, I don't know, 17 or 18, and it was everything was very expensive back then. It only had like maybe 8 megabytes of sample time or something like that, 8 megabytes of RAM or a couple megabytes of RAM. They were very, very they were very, very limited for what you could do. But at the time, it was pretty advanced stuff. In 1997, I think it was, or 98, I got an Akai S5000, and I loaded up with like 100 megabytes of RAM or 128 megabytes of RAM, something like that. And I had enough time so I could actually put pianos and stuff in there, strings, things like that, so I could do real serious, using it to emulate orchestral instruments, but also to sample lots of songs and sample lots of things like that. So I've been using samplers for a very long time. And back then, on the SO1 and the S2800, it didn't really show you the waveform like this does. This is the waveform here. It only showed you these numbers here. And I also used an Ensoniq EPS 16 or something like that. I forget what the name of it was exactly. But I had one of those as well in my room, my dorm room in college. My roommate had one of those he brought to the table. It's like the Ensoniq ASR 6, ASR Plus, or I mean, these names are arbitrary names, but really cool gear from back in the day. But they only had these numbers here. So what you would have to do is you'd have to listen to things and trigger it just do your start time. So instead of looking at a waveform like this, you would grab the sample start right here, over here where it says sample start and sample end, sample start right here, and you'd move this up, this number, and you wouldn't see the line like that. So you'd basically be looking at it without all this like this data here. You wouldn't be able to see any of this, and you'd be moving this, and it would, and you'd trigger it like that. S2000 was 16 megabytes. So the I didn't have the 16 megabyte upgrade at the time. I had the I just had like the baseline that came with it for a long time. It was like a mini 3000. Yep. I couldn't afford the 3000. So I was like, and the SO1 was like whatever type of thing. Where do you live in New York? 185 dB. Also, that's very loud. Don't listen to things at 185 dB. So, yeah, the S2800. I didn't have the 16 megabyte upgrade. I just had the baseline, the factory RAM that came with it. And then when I got the 5000, I did get the upgrade for that, which was like 128 megabytes or something. And it was like $300. It was so expensive. Oh, you're Westchester. Okay, cool. I'm down here in Greenwich Village. It was like $300 for 128 megabytes. So these days, if I want to upgrade the RAM of my computer, like let's say I've got a computer that I can actually upgrade the RAM. So I want to put in, like let's say I want to put in like 16 gigabytes of RAM. 16 gigabytes of RAM on an upgraded like RAM chip is like $80, something like that, $100 maybe. And we're talking about gigabytes, 16 gigabytes of RAM, right? Back then, this is in the 90s, was 128 megabytes was like $300. So we're talking like a big difference in price. So things are much, much cheaper these days. And plus you can do everything on your computer, which is good and bad. This is one of the arguments for getting a push from Ableton Live, because doing sampling and stuff with the push is great. I also have a machine that I use, the Machine MK3, that I also like doing sampling in that. I don't have that in front of me though. Actually, I should bring it in here. We'll work with I'll show you a Machine tomorrow for sampling and stuff like that in there. And it's, using the hardware changes everything. But I also have the MPC Live because I also don't love to be tied down to my computer. Also, I find that making beats with the MPC away from the computer is different from making beats with the computer. So I like to kind of get different like creative inspiration from different places. So it's nice to not always be tied into your laptop all the time. So software is great. You can do a lot with it. It's very easy to use, but it's nice to use hardware too. And that's where I came from. So let's go back to this. So we have our sample start, our sample end. We've got our loop points here. And if we go back to our mapping editor right here, we've got our key mapping here. Here's the low key, the high key right over here. And then here's our root note. So let me go through and show you the same thing inside of Ableton's sampler. Now, I don't really use the sampler very much because it's not... I found that it just doesn't, I don't know, it's a bit old, kind of. It came out a long time ago. It does the job, but I don't love the way it works. I prefer working in Kontakt, and I would say that if you are going to be doing a lot of sampling stuff and you're working heavily with samples, then you should invest in Kontakt. It's really deep and you can do a lot with it, but to just do basic sampling stuff, it's actually very simple to use. So I like the interface on it a lot. I think they've done a good job with it, and it does enable you to do some complex things if you want to go there. But it's not one of those cases where it's too difficult for easy stuff. It's actually really easy for easy stuff. So it works in all different cases. So that's why I like using Kontakt. I like showing Kontakt. But I do want to show you a couple different things just so we can get the idea of how all this stuff works and that it's basically the same everywhere. So what we can do here is in here, down here is where the sample actually is. And there's a flag here that shows me my start point and my end point. And I can go over here and I can see here's the number for it down here. And so I can move that, or I can move my end point over there on the right-hand side. So you can see both of those places, but it's easier just to grab the flag down here. Now, with this one, it doesn't seem to allow me to make it bigger. I know Simpler does do that. So let's drag it into Simpler as well. Grab the same one, I'm just going to drag it down here. When I drag it down, it automatically creates a simpler instrument. And if I click on this button right here, it pops the editor up here to the right. Or if I take out my browser, I can see it across the whole screen. And this really allows me to see that sample in more detail. Now, like I said, Sampler is actually quite old. Sampler is really good for if you're going to do multi-samples, if you want to put multiple instruments on here, which we're going to show you in just a second. But Simpler has a some really cool tricks up its sleeve, but just real basic. Here's our sample start point. I'm going to turn off the snap. Here's our sample start. Here's our sample end over here on the right. They're just flags, and you just grab them. So if all I want to do is grab that kick drum, there it is. Now, with Simpler, the basic instrument that comes with Ableton Live, you cannot adjust your key zones because it doesn't allow multi-sampling. It does have this thing called slice mode, which we'll talk about another time. And slice mode is kind of like multi-sampling, kind of. It's a thing that the EXS24 now does as well inside of Logic. They took it basically from here. Kontakt also allows you to slice up samples, but that's more difficult, not more difficult, but it's more advanced, and we're not going to be getting into that today so much. So just right here, one thing that it's missing is it doesn't have any key zones. But if I go over here to this one, here's my sampler again. Here's this. Let me go ahead and make this a bit louder. So we can adjust the start point. I can adjust the end point. So all I have is that one hit. Okay. Now if I go back over here to my zones, click these, you can see the key zones are across all these keys. So if I play low notes, if I play high notes, right, it allows me to play all these different keys across my whole entire keyboard, similar to Kontakt, and it shows it in a kind of similar manner. Right, there we go. There's all my snares across my keyboard there. Now you see a little R. What do you think that R stands for? The R stands for the root note, which is, I wish you could just grab it up there and change it, but down here is where you've got the R, and it shows you the root key is a C3. Now, if I change this, you'll see it move. If you look over here on the right-hand side, if I move that root key here, it'll move the little R over there on the right-hand side. But you can't just click and drag the R over here. I don't think there's any, you can't hold down a key and move it. Oh, you can actually hold down Option. Oh, there you go. Cool. Nice. All right. Sweet. You can, as I've said, I don't really use this one that much, but that kind of makes sense that they would allow it to do that. So you hold down Option and you can drag that around. You can change that root key. Now what that does, as I've said before, is this makes it so that key is playing the original sample. So, for example, right now, my root key is set for that F3. That's where the root key is set. So now this note here is playing the sample, that snare drum sample. Let me go ahead and make it so it's like this. Boom, boom. There we go. So we got... Cool, so there's my loop. Pull it down. If I play the C3 now, you can hear it's playing a little bit slower and lower. Right? If I go to F, that's the original pitch. And the original tempo. It's the original audio. right? So let me just go ahead and put that back to C3. There we go. Boom. Okay, now let's show you a loop in here as well. So I'm going to set my sample start and sample this here. And we're going to do sustain mode, turn on a loop down here. Boom. And when I click on that button, this one right here, this turns on my loop. And now I can set my loop to be across here, right? And let's zoom in on this. There we go. And now there's my loop, and you can see the end point is actually outside of the loop, but we're never actually going to hit that end point because the loop loops before that. So if I hit play, there we go. I'm just holding it down and it's looping that part. Okay. Now if I wanted to, I could adjust this over here like this. Boom. And just make that. Cool. I'm going to adjust this over here. And if you want to get really precise with it, you have to zoom in and get really precise. There's different types of looping in all these different samplers. You can loop forwards and backwards, or you can loop forwards. So see how it's going backwards and forwards there. This doesn't, I mean, it sounds cool for drums. It's not super useful unless you're doing some kind of weird thing with your drums. But this is really useful for pads, strings, other things that you might use samplers for, which we can talk about here in a little bit. So there's various things there. Now the tuning is right here. Here's the detune, which allows you to tune that individual sample. So if I want to have that drum loop on this one note, C3. There we go. So now it's just on the one note. If I play any other notes, any other keys on my keyboard, we're not going to hear it. Just that one right there. But I want it to be like slower and lower. Then what I can do is I can detune it and turn it, not detune it, let's do the tuning. Where is it? Do they have it on here? This is Sense. Oh, what's up, Malik? How you doing? It doesn't look like pitch. Oh, here we go, pitch. Here you go, transpose over here. There we go. I can transpose it down, or I can transpose it up. Right? So all I'm doing is I'm just hitting that same key on my keyboard, but now it's playing it at a different pitch. Okay. If we go back to Kontakt, it does the same thing. And again, I'm just showing these in both of these just so you can see that basically all these work very same-ish. In here, there it is right there. In here, it's just on the screen right there next to it, tuning. So if I go and I click on this, move this over, move this. Cool, let me zoom in a little bit. There we go, I'm gonna make sure we're looped correctly. There we go. Cool, so you have this one here. If I wanna tune it, I can tune it, I can double click and type in a tuning. And you can hear it's changing the pitch as it goes. And it's also changing that speed. So I can do that by changing the tuning right here. And this is sample by sample. So if I have multiple samples in here, I can change the tuning for multiple of these samples. So let's go ahead and set up a multi-sample instrument. Let's set up a little drum kit using this beat loop right here. So this beat loop has a kick, it's got a snare, it's got a hi-hat. They're all separated out, so it makes it easy to kind of trigger this. So let's go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this and put it right here on that one note. Now I'm going to take this, I'm going to turn the loop off. I don't need the loop. Turn the loop off, and I'm going to set the end point here, the little end point flag right there. So now let's listen to it. And you can hear there's a hi-hat in there. So let's go ahead and let's grab the second one here and see if we can get rid of that hi-hat. I don't know if we can or not. There's that one. Hold on a second. Let's see if we can grab. I just want to grab a clean kick drum. Let's see about one of these. Yeah, that one. There we go. Okay, there we go. Because I want to have the kick drum without the hi-hat. Yeah, you hear that? It's got the hi-hat in it. So I'll zoom in. There we go, looks pretty good. And over here, grab it. Cool, so we can hear now there's a nice clean kick drum there. Cool, right, there's that. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go over here and take this, and I'm gonna right click on it and go to duplicate the zone, and I'm just gonna move it over by one key right there. So I just duplicated it, I right click. Let me do it one more time. I right click on it and I go to duplicate zone. And now deselect it and then just grab it again and it moves it over. So this one here is here. How precise do you want to be with your chops? It depends. Different people are more or less precise. Some people are real sloppy with their chops. Some people are not sloppy at all. They're very precise with their chops. It's really up to you how precise you want to be. So now we got this one here. I'm going to go ahead and put this one is my snare drum. And the snare drum's over here. Go in here and grab the sample start right there. Boom. And then go like that. I was being super precise with that one because of the that hi-hat. So now there we go. There's that. I can see my root key is here. There's the root key. I can also see the yellow key down here is my root key. If I go over here and click on this one, there's my root key. So now I've got on this note here, this key, I've got a kick drum. Right? And let's grab that hi-hat as well. So I'm going to take this one, I'm going to copy it, or duplicate, drag it over. But let's put it right here in the middle there. And now this one, I'm going to grab the hi-hat. There we go. There we go, cool. So I've got this here. Right, it's hard for me to play with one hand like this. But, so now I could program a beat with this. So let's go ahead and just put this down here. Let's put that to 85. We'll just use the same tempo. So and I'm going to set this up for cool. Okay, and we'll go ahead and record into that. Okay. And you can hear it's really straight and boring. I played it like swung, but when I quantized it, it like straightened it up again. So let's go ahead and let's put in, let's see, let's get a groove going on here. We'll use the Logic 16th. Okay, and you can hear this one is real quick. And that's because it's not triggering the whole sample all the way through. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So, yeah, the grooves are great, right? The grooves are super, super dope. So let's go ahead and get it so it plays the sample all the way through here. Now, there's, in here, I always forget how to do this with Kontakt. There's a thing in different samplers called one-shot mode, and I always forget how to do it in here in Kontakt. But one-shot mode, basically I'll make Kontakt do one-shot by setting up the release to be a little bit longer here. One shot, what it does is it plays the sample all the way through to its end. And if somebody knows how to do it, please remind me, because I can never remember how to set up the one-shot mode. So what I do is I always just set the release here. And if you set the release, what it's going to do is it's going to release it. It's going to make it a long release. So it's basically just going to play this whole drum sample, because these drum samples are real short. There we go. Cool. So now we just like we've taken that sample and we've chopped it up. This is what we call chopping up a sample. So we've chopped up the sample, made a drum kit. Let's go ahead and do this over here in the sampler as well. So I'm going to take this and right click. We're going to duplicate it. And the second one here, let's go in here. Is it where it says release trigger in the source section? Let's go take a look at that. Release trigger, source. No, I don't think so. But I don't know, maybe. I mean, there's usually a button that says one shot. In most of these, there's a button that says one shot, but here, there's not a button that says one shot. Reverse, standard. It would. I feel like it would be in here. Time, microwave, presets here. These are different effects settings and stuff. Or maybe it's in the wave editor. Not the wave editor. The mapping editor. Maybe it's in the wave editor. I can never remember where this thing is. If it's even in here. I think I always just give up. That's why I don't know where it is. Because I feel like I always give up. And then I just move on, like always. I should just look it up sometime, but it's easy enough. Like I don't really do my drum sampling in Kontakt. I use Kontakt for other stuff, not drum sampling, not like this. I just use Ableton Live, which I'm going to show you here in a few minutes how to do it in Ableton Live without messing around with all this. So that's why I don't know how to do it in Kontakt, because I never do it in Kontakt. Like it's something I don't use it for. I don't use it for just chopping up drums. But over here in my simpler instrument, let's grab this. And not you. Formalized drum sounds from samples. Can you save them to Ableton as your own drum kit? Yeah, absolutely. Yep, you can. But it's actually easier to do it a slightly different way, which I'm going to show you. Right now, we're just kind of going through the basics of sampling, so that like this is not how I would do this. I'm just showing you how we have done it traditionally, but it's not how I do it right now. So don't worry about it right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this drum kit here, this drum loop. And let's go back over to the sample. So this one here, this one here. I'm going to turn off the loop on these. And we're going to set up this one to have this. Which one was it? It was that one right there. That's the one we ended up liking. So I'm going to grab that one. Boom. Just go in here and grab the whole thing. I'm going to be super precise with the end here. So it has that. And in this one here, I feel like this one has a one-shot button, but maybe it doesn't. Sample release mode. There we go. This is probably the one-shot button. I don't remember. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to move this over here to this one. Yeah. That's probably for my loops. Again, where's the one-shot button? Well, anyway, I'll show you. There is. I promise you, there is a one-shot button that exists. It's just these ones just aren't showing it anywhere that I see it right now. On the envelope here, loop, none, sync, trigger. All right, well, again, I'll just set my release up. I'm going to set it down to, there we go. Now, over here, okay, cool. So this one here, I'm going to go ahead and turn that loop off again. and set the end point here, the start and the end point. There we go. It's got that hi-hat in it, so I'm going to go ahead and kill that hi-hat there. And now let's duplicate this one more time and grab just the hi-hat. There we go. Boom, boom, and there we go. I'm going to put the hi-hat in the middle again. There we go. Cool. So now right? And it should sound basically the same as this one here. You can hear the pitch is off a little bit because the pitch on these, the root note in here is not set to C3. It's all set to C sharp 3. So let's pull that down. Oh, I know what it is. It's the tuning. I had set my tuning differently. So let's go back over here to our pitch. There we go. Kill the tuning on all these. Yeah, cool. So it's all the same. Okay, cool. So now we got... There we go. So now, this one I had the pitch changed as well. I forgot about that. So with these here, there we go. Turn the pitch down. There we go. Boom. And I think, yeah, these are individual samples. Go ahead and set, there we go. Now we're okay. So with these here, we've got our little drum kits. Right, and so far they should sound basically the same. There shouldn't be really any difference with this stuff. So that's setting up a little drum kit here where you've got everything on different places. Now that's kind of the basics of sampling is what you can do. You use your key zones, you can use velocity zones, and you can use your different notes, and you can start time, end time, and trim things down. And put them on different keys to make like little drum kits and stuff. And this is how I started sampling, was I just went ahead and would chop up things and just kind of make my own drum kits, and I would make my own samples. Like I would grab a synth or a vocal or something from a song or something like that and do it like that. Now, one other thing that we want to talk about in here is just real quick, how can we do this in Ableton Live? Because there is an easier way to do this in Ableton Live. There's actually two different ways to do this, which make it super, super, super easy. So one is if I have this drum loop here, go back down to my hip hop samples. I got this drum loop, and if I drag it into a MIDI track, if I just make a MIDI track, here, let's go ahead and make a new MIDI track, fresh MIDI track, and I double click it so it says drop an instrument or sample here. I can just drag it down into there, and now it gives me it in a simpler instrument, which does that. This is what we call a simpler instrument. Now the simpler instrument has three different modes. It's got here classic, one shot, and slice. One shot is a one shot. It's just a normal drum sample kind of mode where it just plays the sample to the end. If I do it on this loop, it's going to be really annoying because once I hit it, it's going to play it all the way to the end, and I can't stop it. There's no way to stop it. So one shot with a full long sample like this is really, really annoying. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the start point here. There we go. And now it's just a one shot. It's just going to play that sample through to the end. If I put it in classic mode is what the other two have been dealing with. In classic mode, we've got our envelope down here, attack, decay, sustain, release, and we can set the release up or whatever, which is what I'm doing with the other two. But you don't really, if you're just doing drums, just put it in one-shot mode. One-shot mode is for if you are going to add this into a drum rack, which I'm going to show you in just a second. But then it's also got this, let me put all this back over here. It's got this really interesting mode called slice mode. And what slice mode does is it analyzes the transients. it analyzes these transients and it automatically puts the samples, it automatically assigns them to keys on my keyboard. So I just go down here. And now it's automatically sliced these by the transients. Now you can see it's a little bit weird. So I would want to go through and adjust some of these by hand, and you can do that up here up top, and I can make this bigger. But this is actually a really cool way to use this. If you just want to slice up your drum kit real quick, you can just go ahead and slice it up. It doesn't take that long to do it, and a lot of times that actually works. It's a little bit, Ableton Live gets a little bit off sometimes, which is kind of annoying, but here it goes. Go ahead and put a few of these in. And again, this isn't really the way I would do this either, but it is a way that you can do it, and I'll explain why I don't really do it like this in a second. But there we go. So now I've got put playback into poly. There we go. Now you can hear that it's actually got my hi-hat in there. So that's not the one I want to use. This is the one I want to use right here. Right? And so you can see it's kind of in a weird location here. It's this F here. And I can't change the keys on this. So this is cool sometimes. It's not always as cool as you want it to be, but it does make for really fast slicing here. Now let me show you one other way that's actually the way that I do it all the time, since we're talking about this, and we'll go back and kind of deal with this a little bit more later. But what I like to do is I'll grab my sample that I'm using and I'll drag it straight in here like this, and I'll make sure everything's set up correctly. Okay, so we can see Ableton Live is set the transients in these weird places here. So I'm going to go ahead and just move these over a little bit, and I can make any kind of adjustments that I want to make in here. And I'm going to set this up before I actually do anything with it, just to make sure it's nice and clean, because this is very easy to see what's going on. And I'm going to grab just the notes that I want. So I want this note, I want this snare drum, and I want this drum kit right here, drum hit, I should say, the kick drum. So I'm going to drag my loop over here like this, so it's not going to grab too much of it. And now I right click on it and go in here and go to slice to new MIDI track. It's going to ask me, how do I want to slice it? I want to slice it by my transient right here, and I hit OK, boom. And now what that does is it puts every drum hit into my drum rack. So now I can just grab the ones I want. I don't want that one. I don't want that one. I do want that one right there. I'm going to put that over here in the beginning. Turn the loop off. Get my hi-hat over here. I can put my hi-hat on the note that I want it to be on. There we go. And I can delete all the ones I don't want. So that makes my life so much easier. Right? And all I'd have to do probably turn this into one-shot mode. Yeah, because they're not in one-shot mode. There we go. Right? And so you can do that really, really quickly there. So that's just a quick overview of stuff. We're going to come back and I'm going to show you that in more detail here in a second. But first, let's just take a look at these notes here and just look at all the things we've talked about here. So here's the looping stuff. You can set your loop points. You've got the sample start, you got the sample end, and the loop point can be the whole thing or it can be something in the middle there. It just has to be, the loop point has to be inside of that sample start and sample end, but they do not have to be the same things. Okay. Velocity zones is similar to the key zones, but it's on different velocities. You can set up velocity zones in Kontakt, you can set up velocity zones in Sampler, but you cannot set up velocity zones inside of Simpler. And then groups is, it means that if I want to, the really cool use for groups is, for example, if I have a sampler hardware that has multiple outputs. So over here, let's say my sampler has 8 outs. So I've got my main 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and 7 and 8 as stereo pairs. And I have a drum kit that I want a drum kit to be assigned to outputs 3 and 4 so I can put some compression or something on them. And I have a different drum kit that I want to assign to 5 and 6 so I could put some different stuff on it, some different compression or different EQ. And everything is hardware. So what I can do is I can have drum kit number 1 set up as group number 1. And I can have drum kit number 2 set up as group number 2. And that allows me to assign those really easy. Let's say drum kit number 1 is 10 samples and drum kit number 2 is 15 samples. Well, I don't have to go through each individual sample and assign it to an output. I can just say group 1 goes to output 3 and 4. Group 2 goes to output 5 and 6. And that makes life much, much easier for me. So that's really what groups are for. You can also use it for different effects and things like that. So if I wanted to put a filter on group 1 or a delay on group 2, like inside of the machine itself, then I can do that really easily. But whatever you want to use them for. But basically groups just allows you to group samples together so you can apply or do something with them as a group of samples. That's what the groups are for. Okay. All right, and that brings us to the end. Everything else after that is like Kontakt stuff. So let's go ahead and stop this recording here.